Let's talk about goals. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. Welcome to my channel. If you've never been here before, I talk about books and writing. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I did or did not accomplish my 2022 reading goals and what my goals are for 2023. You may notice I'm filming in a new location. I just found my garbage can. Push that out of the way. My kids are currently home from school, so even though I am 2 floors away from where they are supposed to be, you are probably still going to hear their little voices breaking in, and I apologize. Let's start by looking at all the goals I made for myself for 2022 and whether or not I actually accomplished any of them. The first goal was that I wanted to read 75 books. And I'm filming this on December 26th, and I've read 97 books. So I killed that goal by a lot. And I'm going to talk about that more in my goals for 2023, about whether or not I'm going to set a new number goal for me and what it's going to be. But I don't think I'm going to hit 100 books, mainly because this next week is pretty packed full with childcare, and I've been having a hard time concentrating on reading this month. Usually December's a great reading month for me, but this year's been a little bit more difficult. So we'll see. Maybe I'll surprise myself and read 3 books in the next, 6 days? But I don't know if that's going to happen. I did talk a little bit in other videos about my reading burnout, and I do think reading this many books in a year has contributed heavily to it. The next goal I set for myself in 2022 was that I wanted to read 12 classics, and I made a video about it, which I'll post in the description, about all the classics I wanted to read. A little background on me. I majored in English literature in college, and minored in history and philosophy. So between those 3, I read a lot of classic literature. And then I also went to a high school in which we read a ton of classic literature. I also did AP classes and stuff like that, which contributed, again, to me reading a lot of classics. So this year I read 4 out of the 12 I had planned, which as a competitive person is really bad, but I kind of realized something. So the 4 I read were Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which was great because I finally finished reading all of Jane Austen's 6 main novels. I read The Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys, which I really enjoyed and liked a lot. I read The Quiet American by Graham Greene, which I thought was a solid, good read. And I read My Antonia by Willa Cather, which has been on my TBR for a really long time. But I also started Brideshead Revisited and read about 50 pages and then returned it to the library because I just couldn't get into it. And I also started The Aeneid, which I am going to finish at some point. I just think it's going to take me a really long time. It's going to be one of those books that I read over years because you kind of can read a book like that over years. I did notice something about myself, though. When I made that goal, I had gotten really into the classical reading side of BookTube. And something about me is that a lot of the books that I was seeing people fall in love with, revisiting classics and falling in love with them, were books I've already read. So, I've already read Jane Eyre. I've already read Frankenstein and Dracula and Anna Karenina. And the majority of the books I see people loving. And I sort of realized something also. I'm going to turn 40 this year in 2023, which is so exciting, I guess. But I don't really feel the need to read classics anymore. There are some that I do really want to read at some point in my life. And so if I feel like picking any of them up this year, I will. But I'm not going to give myself a number of classics that I want to read this year. It's going to kind of be more like, if I feel like it, I'll read one. But I'm not going to go into 2023 with a list of classics that I feel like I need to get to. My third goal, and last, that I set for 2022 was to read/listen to 5 Shakespeare plays. I have a lifelong goal to read/listen to all of Shakespeare's plays. And so I do need to kind of do that regularly to hit that goal. And I set 5 specific plays I wanted to read to or listen to. And they were A Winter's Tale, Julius Caesar, Much Ado About Nothing, All's Well That Ends Well, and As You Like It. And I only did 2. I listened to A Winter's Tale, and it immediately became one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. It was fantastic. And then I listened to Julius Caesar, and I really liked it a lot. I did those in January and March of last year. Now, The last three I had were comedies. Much Ado About Nothing, All's Well That Ends Well, and As You Like It. And I'm not super into Shakespeare's comedies. So I think after that, it got to a point where I really wasn't that interested. Also, I had listened to the Shakespeare sessions for both of those first two plays, Winter's Tale and Julius Caesar, and they were fantastic. They're on Spotify. It's basically like listening to a play. They were wonderful. The Shakespeare sessions did not do any of those three plays. And I think if they had, I might have stuck with it because I was like trying to find another recording company to listen to. And I listened to the beginning, I think, of As You Like It. And I didn't like the audio. So I stopped. My plan for 2023 is to listen to 2 or 3 Shakespeare plays. I'm going to make it a little easier on myself. And I'm also not going to make a list of what I should read. And that way, if I find, like if I go through the Shakespeare sessions and they have a new recording of one I haven't read, I'll listen to that one because they were so great. So here's a list of all the Shakespeare's plays I have not read that you might find on one of my wrap-ups in 2023. I have my computer because I can't do this by heart. All's Well That Ends Well, As You Like It, A Comedy of Errors, Love's Labor Lost, The Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, Two Gentlemen of Verona. Those are all the comedies. Then the histories, we have Henry IV Part 2, Henry V, Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3, Henry VIII, and King John. Oh no, also Pericles and Richard II. There's a very low chance I will read any of those because I've read 2 histories and I really didn't like them. And then lastly, for the tragedies, I have Coriolanus, Cymbeline, Timon of Athens, and Troilus and Cressida. So 7 comedies, 9 histories, and 4 tragedies to choose from. I mean, I feel like in my wrap up for next year, I'm going to be like, and I read 2 more tragedies because I am just a tragedy girl. So those are my 3 main reading goals for 2022. So now let's talk about my reading goals for 2023. How many books do I want to read? I'm going to set a weird goal. I want to read under 80 books. So I know that's kind of strange. Usually it's all about more. But I'm going to be super honest. I felt like reading got a little bit away from me this year in terms of enjoyment. I found myself really picking short books over long books, even if I thought I might enjoy the long books more. I got really into thrillers, which was really fun. I like reading thrillers. But there was sort of a weird turning point for me on this. And that was the December Book of the Month list when it came out. So I belong to Book of the Month, and because so many lovely people who watch these videos have used my referral link, I have a ton of free add-ons, which is awesome. So every month I get 2 or 3 books, and you have to pick one of the main books though to get it. So I don't skip months that often. And I was looking at the choices for December 2022, and there was a rom-com. I don't really like rom-coms. There was a thriller, but it was about a missing child, and I can't do those kinds of stories. There was a historical fiction, I think, about World War II, which I don't really like reading historical fictions about World War II anymore. And then there was a literary fiction, and there was Babel/Babel. I don't know how you pronounce it. But when I saw Babel, I was thinking to myself, oh, that book's so long, I'm not going to pick that one. And then I looked and I was like, oh, wow, like that's not a thriller I want to read. And I don't want to read that historical fiction. And I don't want to read a rom-com. And I read the first, like the sample for the lit fic, and it just wasn't grabbing me. And so I'm like, why am I not picking Babel? It's a dark academia fantasy about language, which is totally something I would love. And one of my very good friends was at the time currently reading it and loving it. And then I started thinking to myself, I've been foregoing reading a lot of long books so that I could have more books on my wrap-ups, which is weird because, you know, it just is a number, and I'm a very competitive person. So I think that's part of it, is that I look at other people's videos who have like 20 books on their wrap-ups. And then I have to remind myself, you know, a lot of booktubers aren't writers who are also writing and editing and doing things like that. So in short, when I'm thinking about 2023, I'm thinking about months in which I read like 2 books because I've decided to read an 800-page book, and passing over 200-page thrillers for big fat fantasy novels that I would have sunk my teeth into when I was 25. So less books, but bigger books is the plan. Lots of big, fat books in 2023. So in conclusion, my goals are kind of weird. Read less than 80 books. Only read classics if I want to. And read maybe 2 or 3 Shakespeare plays. I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's kind of a strange list of goals. I have some books I'm looking forward to, but I'm not going to put any specific long list of titles that I feel like I have to read this year. I did make a nice stack for you of some of the big fat books I want to read this year, some of which I'll read in January. So let's talk about those for a little bit. First is Age of Myth by Michael Sullivan. This isn't that fat, but it's a big series, so that's why I'm including it. I asked my sister-in-law to get it for me for Christmas, and she did. And it's a high fantasy. There's these creatures that people think are gods, but are actually just really, really long living creatures, and then a human manages to kill one. And I have been really wanting to just fall into a high fantasy world. I've been waiting and waiting for season 2 of Wheel of Time to come back on Amazon, and this kind of sounded like it would be a good series for me to get into again. Next, obviously, I want to read Babel, which is about the power of translation and people who learn multiple languages, and then that there's sort of a magic in translating from a language that's not your first language into another language that's not your first language. It takes place in 1828, and I know it's England, but not it's Oxford, but I know that there's fantasy in it. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this, and I have this on my January TBR. I'm going to tackle this bad boy at the beginning of the new year, and it's got a really great map of the city of Oxford. And I'm a sucker for a book with a map. Next, I have The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky, and this came out a while ago. I bought this. I know I bought it during the pandemic, but I remember I bought it during the pandemic when I was leaving packages for 5 days. So that was a while ago. And it's about a Viking-ish person who ends up in North America and meets a Inuit-ish. I don't know if Inuit's the right word, because I always think of Inuit as more like Alaska. I'm not sure the correct terminology for a native person living on the east coast of northern Canada. But it's about their two cultures meeting, the wolf and the whale. So I really want to read this. My good friend read it, liked it, said she thought I would like it, but also that it had some disturbing stuff in it. So, keeping that in mind. Next, I want to finally read Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. I read City of Brass in July 2021, which was right before I started my BookTube channel. And it wasn't feeling the pressure of having to finish over 8 books a month. So I really liked it. And so I want to read this one. And I bought it to read this summer, and then I just never did. I do remember thinking, should I pick that up? Should I pick that up? And I'd be like, well, no, this is, how many pages? 6 something. 610 pages. I could read 3 other books for the same amount. Probably not 3. 2.5 other books for the same amount of pages. And so this is going on the list of books I am going to read in 2023. Then I have The Distant Hours by Kate Morton. I've read most of Kate Morton's stuff. The only reason I figured out I hadn't read this one, I got it from Half Price Books. There were a bunch. I was I don't know if I read that one. And I read the blurb, and one of the characters is the name of one of my children. So I was I didn't read this one because I would remember that. So Kate Morton's books are all a little bit similar. They're historical mysteries, but not like a thriller mystery, more like a literary mystery. They tend to span over 100 years sometimes. I really enjoy them. Don't know much about this one, but we'll be in England and there will be a historical mystery. She always jumps between 2 time periods. So in this one, we've got 1941, and it looks maybe the 80s. I don't know. I'll let you know when I read it soon. This one's in the 5s, I think. Yeah. 5 something. Okay, so the next book is So Many Partings by Kathy Cash Spellman. My aunt bought this for me a while ago, when my twins were newborns. And she's whenever you can get to it. I'm okay. So I've had it sitting on my shelf for a really long time and just haven't started it. Fast forward to this October. my cousin, who is not her child, came over to hang out, and we were talking about books because she loves to read also. And we were talking about books that like really stuck with us. And she was like, "Oh, have you ever read So Many Partings?" And I like walked over and took it off the bookcase. And she said that everyone on that side of our family has read it. So, but she also told me she read it a long time ago, like in college, which for us is like over 20 years ago. And she was like, "I don't know if it ages well." She's like, "But I do remember absolutely loving it." So now I feel like I have to read it. And it's another big fat one. It's like 500 pages. But now I have like renewed vigor in terms of picking this book up. And then lastly, I would like to read part of the Aeneid this year. I'm not going to finish it, but maybe read a couple books, like 3 or 4 books. It's 12 books total. If you're not familiar with the story of the Aeneid, it is about Aeneas who founds Rome. And the part I'm most interested in reading is about his love story with Dido, which is a tragic love story. And I do tend to like tragic love stories when I'm reading my mythology. So those are all the big fat books that I'm going to put on my TBRs this year, since I am no longer going to be concerned about how many books are in my wrap up. I feel like it'll be good to have some months where I just read 3 or 4 really long, great, meaty books and not always having a ton of short stuff on there. I mean, the fact that I decided to give up reading Saga means I'm not going to have a lot of graphic novel series unless I get into a new one this year. So yeah, and like the Singing Hills trilogy, which was a novella trilogy I really liked, ended. So I'm not going to have a ton of short books. So this is the year of the big fat book. This is the year of less reading, more enjoyment, less classics, same amount of Shakespeare, and it'll be fun. Have you done your reading goals? Do you do reading goals? I really don't usually do reading goals every year. Like, usually I just give myself a number. But if you have a really interesting goal, because I do think people do fun goals sometimes, like I'm going to read a different genre every month, which I would not want to do because I'm just not that adventurous of a reader. Like, I don't want to read a political thriller or a really dry nonfiction. But if you have a cool goal, please pop it in the comments. And if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you. And please drop me a sparkle emoji or a firework emoji because we're getting to the end of the year and that feels very New Year to me. As always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.